We are told that human civilization began in Egypt and Sumer, neat and orderly, rising from the dust of prehistory. However, scattered across the planet are stones so massive and so precisely shaped that they refuse to fit into this story. From the high Andes to remote Siberia, from Easter Island to the very foundations of the pyramids themselves, megaliths stand like fragments of a forgotten language. What if these blocks are not the works of the first civilizations, but the last traces of one that came before, a world erased by the flood? Tonight, we follow the stones carefully, and you may begin to see the outlines of a history no one ever told us. Above the red-tiled roofs of Cusco, a city in the southeastern region of Peru, where the Andes cradle the ancient capital of the Inca Empire, massive zigzag walls rise like fortifications built for a race of giants. The stones tower overhead, some weighing 200 tons, fitted together with such precision that 5 centuries of earthquakes haven't shifted them a millimeter. Each massive block has been shaped with multiple angles and curves, creating interlocking joints so complex that modern engineers struggle to understand how they were planned, let alone executed. These aren't walls built by people who simply wanted to stack stones. This is engineering so sophisticated, so deliberately complex, that it raises a fundamental question. Why would any civilization choose to build this way when simpler methods would have been far easier to achieve? Sacsayhuaman overlooks Cusco from its commanding position on a hill that rises nearly 12,000 feet above sea level. The Inca called it the Royal Eagle, or Satisfied Falcon, and today's visitors often assume they're looking at Inca military architecture, the zigzag walls that supposedly protected their capital from invasion. But closer examination reveals something far more puzzling than a fortress, construction techniques that represent an entirely different approach to working with stone. The megaliths of Sacsayhuaman aren't simply large, they're geometrically impossible. Individual blocks weighing up to 200 tons have been carved with 12 or more interlocking faces, each angled to fit perfectly with its neighbors in 3 dimensions. This isn't a matter of finding stones that happen to fit together. Every surface has been deliberately shaped to create a specific relationship with adjacent blocks. To understand the complexity involved, imagine trying to design a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle where each piece weighs as much as a dozen automobiles and must fit perfectly with multiple neighbors simultaneously. Now imagine doing this without computers, without precise measuring instruments, without cranes capable of testing the fit by lifting and repositioning the pieces. The logistics alone should have made such construction impossible. Yet the stones don't just fit. They interlock with precision that exceeds modern construction standards. The joints are so tight that you cannot slide a sheet of paper between them. After centuries of weathering, seismic activity, and temperature fluctuations, the walls remain perfectly aligned. Even modern concrete construction, with its precisely controlled materials and machine-aided installation, rarely achieves such lasting accuracy. The surfaces of the megaliths exhibit characteristics that deepen the mystery. Many blocks display what researchers call nubs, small, regular protrusions that seem to serve no structural purpose. These features appear consistently at megalithic sites worldwide, from Peru to Easter Island to Lebanon, suggesting either shared techniques or shared builders across vast distances and supposedly vast periods of time. Even more puzzling are the scoop marks, curved depressions in the stone surfaces that appear to have been created by removing softened material. These marks don't match the characteristics of any known stoneworking technique. They're too smooth for conventional carving, too uniform for natural weathering. They appear to result from a process that could manipulate stone in ways we don't understand. Some blocks exhibit surfaces that appear slightly convex, bulging outward in gentle curves that create additional contact points with neighboring stones. This three-dimensional shaping requires sophisticated understanding of geometry and stress distribution. The convex surfaces aren't random, they're precisely calculated to enhance the interlocking effect and distribute weight across multiple contact points. The question that haunts researchers is why? Why choose such complexity when simpler construction methods would have been more efficient? Why invest enormous effort in creating 12-sided, three-dimensionally interlocking blocks when rectangular stones would have been easier to quarry, transport, and position? The conventional answer is earthquake resistance. The complex joints allow the stones to move slightly during seismic events without losing structural integrity. But this explanation only deepens the mystery. How did ancient builders know that complex polygonal joints would improve earthquake resistance? This knowledge requires an understanding of engineering principles that weren't formally documented until modern times. It implies sophisticated testing, analysis, and optimization that seems beyond the capabilities typically attributed to pre-Columbian civilizations. The construction sequence at Sacsayhuaman reveals additional puzzles. Archaeological investigation has identified multiple building phases, with the most sophisticated work appearing in the earliest layers. The massive polygonal blocks form the foundation of later construction that shows markedly different characteristics: smaller stones, simpler shapes, conventional fitting techniques that match known Inca construction practices. This pattern suggests the Inca found existing megalithic construction and built upon it using their own methods. But they were unable to match the precision of the original builders. Each successive layer shows decreasing sophistication, as if the knowledge required for megalithic construction was already being lost when historical Inca construction began. Carbon dating and other scientific methods have confirmed Inca presence at the site, but they've also indicated that parts of the structure could be much older. The massive polygonal foundations show different weathering patterns from the later stonework, suggesting they've been exposed to the elements for significantly longer periods. Some researchers propose dates thousands of years before conventional Inca chronology. The absence of Inca documentation for megalithic construction techniques is particularly significant. The Inca maintained detailed records using their quipu system of knotted strings, documenting everything from agricultural cycles to military campaigns to religious ceremonies. Yet no quipu records explain how the massive polygonal blocks were shaped, transported, or positioned. This documentation gap parallels the situation at other megalithic sites worldwide. The most precisely constructed ancient monuments consistently lack historical records explaining their construction methods. It's as if the knowledge required for megalithic building was systematically lost or deliberately hidden from later civilizations. The tool marks found on Sacsayhuaman's megaliths add another dimension to the puzzle. Some surfaces show evidence of cutting techniques that don't match known Inca implements. Long straight cuts with parallel striations suggest systematic material removal using tools with capabilities beyond anything traditionally associated with pre-Columbian South America. Analysis of the limestone used in construction reveals additional anomalies. Russian geophysicists studying erosion patterns discovered that the stone has unusual composition compared to local quarry sources. The limestone exhibits characteristics suggesting it may have been processed, heated, crushed, or chemically treated before being shaped into blocks. This possibility has led some researchers to propose that the megaliths aren't solid stones at all, but rather early forms of concrete or geopolymer. The geopolymer theory attempts to explain the perfect fitting by suggesting the blocks were cast in place rather than carved and transported. According to this hypothesis, builders created molds and poured limestone-based concrete to form interlocking shapes. While this might explain the precision, it raises new questions about the scale of industrial capability required for such massive casting operations. Even if we accept the geopolymer theory, creating hundreds of massive interlocking forms would require industrial-scale materials processing, sophisticated mold-making capabilities, and coordination of construction sequences across years or decades. Such capabilities imply social organization and technical knowledge far exceeding conventional estimates of pre-Columbian Andean civilizations. The similarity between Sacsayhuaman's construction techniques and those found at other megalithic sites worldwide suggests either remarkable cultural exchange or shared origins that conventional archaeology hasn't recognized. The broader implications of Sacsayhuaman extend beyond questions of Inca engineering capability to fundamental assumptions about technological development in ancient societies. If the megalithic elements significantly predate known Inca construction, they imply the existence of sophisticated building traditions in pre-Columbian Peru that surpass the documented achievements of any known civilization in the region. The perfect fitting, the sophisticated joinery, suggests not just advanced stoneworking skills, but also mathematical knowledge, engineering understanding, and organizational capabilities that approach modern standards. Such capabilities typically develop through documented technological progression, yet at Sacsayhuaman they appear without apparent antecedents. Standing among the megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman in the thin air above Cusco, the questions multiply like the angles on the massive stones. Each block represents dozens of precisely calculated cuts, hundreds of measurement decisions, thousands of hours of skilled labor coordinated across years of construction. Their complex geometries encode knowledge that we're only beginning to understand, speaking in a language of stone and mathematics that transcends cultural boundaries and perhaps temporal ones as well. If ancient builders could create interlocking geometries that challenge modern understanding, what other capabilities did they possess? What other knowledge has vanished along with the civilizations that created monuments we're still struggling to comprehend? What other impossible things might they have left scattered across the ancient world, waiting for us to recognize that maybe, just maybe, we're not the first civilization to master the relationship between mind and matter, between knowledge and stone? The questions hang in the rarefied air above Cusco, carried on winds that have blown across these walls for centuries or millennia. In the gathering shadows of an Andean evening, Sacsayhuaman stands as a testament to capabilities that challenge everything we think we know about the ancient world, and the hands that first learned to make the impossible seem inevitable. In Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, where ancient trade routes once carried silk and spices between empires, 3 massive stones rest in silent formation within the foundation of an ancient wall. The site, known today as Baalbek, sits about 60 miles northeast of Beirut, perched 3,000 feet above sea level in the fertile Bekaa Valley. The Romans called it Heliopolis, City of the Sun, and built some of their most ambitious temples there. The Temple of Jupiter, one of the largest religious structures in the Roman Empire, still dominates the skyline with its massive columns and surviving architectural fragments. But beneath the Roman grandeur lies something far more enigmatic, a foundation of megalithic stones that challenges every assumption about ancient capabilities. The 3 stones that form the famous trilithon measure approximately 64 feet in length, 14 feet in height, and 12 feet in thickness. At roughly 900 tons each, they represent some of the largest dressed stones ever incorporated into ancient construction. To put this in perspective, each trilithon block weighs approximately 36 times more than the largest stones used at Stonehenge, and roughly 10 times the weight of the largest blocks in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet the trilithon stones aren't even the largest at Baalbek. In the nearby quarry, unfinished monoliths dwarf even these giants. The stone of the pregnant woman, named after local legend, measures 68 feet long, 14 feet high, and 14 feet wide, weighing over 1,200 tons. Beneath it lies an even larger block discovered in 2014, the Forgotten Stone, which weighs an estimated 1,650 tons, making it the largest quarried stone block ever documented. These unfinished giants tell their own story. They remain partially attached to the quarry bedrock, as if work stopped suddenly and was never resumed. The largest appears nearly ready for extraction, carved free on all sides except for a narrow connection to the mother rock. Tool marks are still visible on their surfaces, long parallel striations that speak of systematic cutting techniques. But what tools could have created such marks in solid limestone? And what method could have been planned for moving blocks that exceed the capacity of any known ancient lifting device? The conventional explanation involves ramps, rollers, and massive human labor forces. Roman engineers were indeed capable of moving extraordinary weights using pulleys, counterweights, and mechanical advantage. They had perfected techniques for quarrying, transporting, and lifting stones weighing dozens of tons. But the trilithon blocks exceed the documented capacity of Roman engineering by an order of magnitude. Roman lifting equipment typically handled loads of 60 tons or less, the weight of the individual drums used to construct the temple of Jupiter's massive columns. These drums show clear evidence of Roman engineering, precisely drilled holes for lifting pins, standardized dimensions, and construction techniques documented in Roman architectural manuals. They fit within the known parameters of Roman capability. The trilithon stones show none of these characteristics, no lifting holes, no evidence of the mechanical aids Romans typically employed for heavy construction. The precision itself poses questions. The trilithon blocks don't just sit in the wall, they integrate seamlessly with the surrounding foundation. Their surfaces align perfectly with adjacent stones, creating joints so tight that water can't penetrate between them. This level of fitting requires not just massive lifting capability, but also incredibly precise positioning. Moving a 900-ton block into exact alignment is a challenge that would test modern equipment operated by experienced crews with laser guidance systems. Archaeological investigation has revealed additional puzzles in the construction sequence. The trilithon sits approximately 20 feet above ground level, positioned on top of smaller foundation stones that weigh several hundred tons each. This means the builders had to lift the 900-ton blocks not just from ground level, but to a significant height while maintaining perfect alignment with the existing structure. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder visited Baalbek and described it as one of the wonders of the world, but even he offered no explanation for how the massive stones were moved. Later, Roman writers mentioned the site's grandeur, but remained silent about construction methods. This absence of technical documentation is particularly puzzling, given that Romans typically took pride in their engineering achievements and recorded them for posterity. If the Romans accomplished one of history's greatest feats of engineering at Baalbek, why didn't they record it? Why didn't they commemorate an achievement that would have surpassed anything else in their architectural repertoire, unless they believed they were never worthy of it? Some researchers have suggested that the trilithon predates Roman construction at Baalbek. This theory gains support from several observations. First, the megalithic block shows signs of weathering patterns different from the clearly Roman stonework in the upper portions of the temples. The surfaces exhibit erosion characteristics that suggest greater age, though determining exact chronology from weathering patterns remains challenging. Second, archaeological evidence indicates continuous human occupation at Baalbek, extending back thousands of years before Roman arrival. Artifacts dating to 9000 BCE have been found in the area, and Phoenician construction predated Roman development of the site, and the quarry evidence strengthens the case for non-Roman origins. The unfinished blocks show clear evidence of systematic extraction techniques, but the work appears to have stopped abruptly. If Romans were quarrying these massive stones, why abandon blocks that were nearly ready for removal? Roman projects occasionally ended due to political or economic factors, but they typically left clear historical records of such decisions. The broader architectural context adds another dimension to the mystery. Baalbek contains not just the famous trilithon, but dozens of massive blocks scattered throughout the complex. The south wall features multiple stones in the 800-ton range, all fitted with similar precision. The Temple of Bacchus sits on a foundation of comparably massive blocks. In total, the site contains at least 40 stones weighing more than 300 tons each, with many exceeding 800 tons. This scale of megalithic construction represents an extraordinary concentration of massive stonework. Even if we accept that Romans possessed techniques for moving such blocks, the logistics of quarrying, transporting, and positioning dozens of them strains credibility. The workforce, equipment, and organizational capability required would have represented one of the largest construction projects in Roman history, yet it receives no mention in historical sources. The magnetic properties reported at various points around Baalbek echo phenomena observed at other megalithic sites worldwide. Visitors report compass anomalies and unusual electromagnetic effects near certain stone blocks. While such reports require careful scientific verification, they align with patterns documented at other precisely constructed ancient sites. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed additional structures buried beneath centuries of accumulated debris around Baalbek. These investigations suggest the surface remains represent only a portion of a much larger complex that extends deep underground. The full scope of megalithic construction at the site may be far greater than currently visible, hidden beneath layers of Roman building, medieval fortification, and natural accumulation. Stylistic analysis offers some clues. The megalithic stones exhibit characteristics found at other precisely constructed ancient sites worldwide. The same attention to perfect fitting, the same massive scale, the same absence of historical record. The builders of Easter Island's precisely fitted walls, the architects of Sacsayhuaman's earthquake-resistant masonry. None left clear historical records explaining their methods or motivations. The pattern suggests either a systematic loss of historical documentation or the existence of capabilities that conventional archaeology has yet to acknowledge. The broader implications of Baalbek extend beyond questions of Roman engineering capability. If the megalithic foundation predates documented classical construction, it implies the existence of sophisticated stoneworking cultures in the ancient Middle East with capabilities exceeding those of known civilizations. Such capabilities would require not just technical knowledge, but also social organization capable of coordinating massive construction projects. The absence of historical documentation for such cultures raises questions about the completeness of our understanding of ancient history. How much of the human past remains hidden beneath assumptions about technological development and cultural evolution? How many achievements have been attributed to later civilizations because earlier ones left no written records of their capabilities? In the gathering darkness of the Bekaa Valley, Baalbek's megaliths continue their ancient vigil, carrying weights that shouldn't be possible and telling stories that shouldn't be true. But there they are, defying explanation and inviting us to reconsider everything we think we know about the hands that first learned to move mountains. The Romans may have built their temples on this foundation, but the foundation itself whispers of hands that knew different secrets, different methods, different relationships with stone and gravity and time. Whether those hands belong to unknown Roman engineers working with lost techniques, or to earlier builders whose names have vanished from memory, the stones themselves remain. 900-ton questions waiting for answers that conventional history has yet to provide. And if Baalbek's builders could move stones that challenge our capabilities today, what else might they have achieved? What other impossible things might they have left scattered across the landscape of the ancient world, waiting for us to find them and admit that maybe, just maybe, we're not the first to reach beyond the limits of what seems possible? At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level on Bolivia's windswept Altiplano, scattered across the desolate plateau, like debris from some cosmic catastrophe, lie the remnants of what appears to be the world's most precisely engineered ancient construction project. Massive blocks of red sandstone and andesite, some weighing over 130 tons, lie broken and dispersed as if torn apart by forces beyond human comprehension. But these aren't rough-hewn stones shaped by primitive tools. Each block exhibits cuts so straight, surfaces so smooth, and joints so precise that they resemble the products of modern industrial manufacturing. At Pumapunku, the question isn't just who built these structures, but what kind of technology they possessed that could achieve machining precision in one of Earth's most inhospitable environments. The site sits within the larger Tiwanaku complex, near the shores of Lake Titicaca, where the high Andes stretch toward the sky in an endless expanse of thin air and harsh sunlight. Most visitors come to see the more intact structures, the Akapana Pyramid, the semi-subterranean temple, the famous Gate of the Sun with its intricate carvings. But it's at Pumapunku, a quarter-mile away from the main complex, where the most puzzling evidence lies, scattered like pieces of an impossible puzzle. The precision is immediately obvious. These aren't stones that have been roughly shaped and fitted together through trial and error. Every cut is mathematically straight, every surface is perfectly flat, every angle is precisely 90 degrees. The tolerances achieve accuracy measured in millimeters, standards that would be acceptable in modern machining operations. The famous H-blocks demonstrate this precision most dramatically. These massive andesite stones have been carved into complex three-dimensional shapes that interlock with other blocks in multiple directions. The H-shaped profile gives them their name, but this simple description doesn't capture their geometric sophistication. Each block features perfectly straight channels, right-angle corners, and surfaces that remain flat across spans of several meters. Creating such precision in andesite presents extraordinary challenges. This volcanic rock ranks 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, making it nearly as hard as steel. Working andesite with copper or bronze tools, the only metals supposedly available to pre-Columbian Andean cultures, would be like trying to carve granite with a butter knife. Even with the modern diamond-tipped tools, achieving the precision found at Pumapunku requires careful planning, precise measurement, and multiple finishing operations. Yet the evidence suggests systematic mass production. The H-blocks aren't unique artifacts crafted over years of painstaking effort. Multiple examples exist, each exhibiting the same geometric perfection, the same precise dimensions, the same machined surfaces. This consistency implies standardized manufacturing processes and quality control systems that approach industrial standards. Drill holes add another dimension to the precision puzzle. Perfectly round holes, some passing completely through blocks weighing over 100 tons, show the smooth, consistent walls characteristic of modern rotary drilling. The holes maintain constant diameter throughout their depth, with no evidence of the step drilling or core removal techniques typically associated with ancient construction. Some holes are so precisely positioned that they align perfectly with corresponding holes in adjacent blocks, creating continuous channels that run through multiple stones. This level of precision requires not just sophisticated drilling capability, but also advanced surveying and measurement techniques to ensure alignment across massive, independently worked blocks. The joint fitting reaches levels that challenge modern construction standards. Where blocks come together, the surfaces match so perfectly that gaps measure less than 1 millimeter. This precision must be maintained across irregular, three-dimensional shapes where multiple surfaces meet at complex angles. Achieving such fits requires either trial and error processes that would take decades per joint, or manufacturing capabilities that exceed anything traditionally attributed to ancient civilizations. Most puzzling are the surfaces that appear to have been machined flat. Some stones show expanses of perfectly level surface spanning several square meters, with flatness tolerances that would be acceptable for precision machinery installation. Creating such surfaces by hand would require techniques and tools for which no evidence exists in the archaeological record. The unfinished blocks scattered throughout Pumapunku tell a story of interrupted work. Some stones appear to have been partially shaped, with cutting operations begun but never completed. Others show evidence of transport preparation, lifting points carved into surfaces, edges trimmed for movement, but remain where they were abandoned centuries or millennia ago. This evidence of interrupted construction suggests the work ended suddenly rather than gradually. If Pumapunku represents a normal construction project that was completed and later damaged, we would expect to find evidence of the complete sequence from rough quarrying through final installation. Instead, we find stones in various stages of completion, as if work stopped abruptly across the entire site. The material analysis raises additional questions. While some blocks are carved from local sandstone, the most precisely worked pieces use andesite that doesn't occur naturally in the immediate area. The nearest andesite sources lie dozens of kilometers away near Lake Titicaca, across terrain that would challenge modern transportation equipment. Moving 130-ton blocks across such distances using pre-Columbian technologies represents an engineering challenge comparable to the precision cutting itself. The conventional explanation attributes Pumapunku to the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished in the region between approximately 300 and 1000 CE. Archaeological evidence confirms Tiwanaku presence at the site, and their architectural style appears in some of the construction, but the most precisely worked stones show characteristics that don't match known Tiwanaku building techniques. Tiwanaku construction typically employed smaller stones fitted together with clay mortar and metal clamps. Their builders were skilled, but they worked within technological parameters consistent with pre-Columbian Andean cultures. The precision elements at Pumapunku represent a quantum leap in capability that appears nowhere else in the Tiwanaku archaeological record. This discrepancy has led some researchers to propose that Pumapunku was built in multiple phases, with the most sophisticated work predating known Tiwanaku construction. According to this theory, the Tiwanaku found existing megalithic structures and incorporated them into their own building projects, but were unable to match the precision of the original builders. The dating evidence remains ambiguous. Radiocarbon dates from organic materials found at Pumapunku confirm human activity during the Tiwanaku period, but they don't necessarily date the stone construction itself. The megalithic elements could be significantly older, with Tiwanaku period occupation representing later use of an existing site rather than original construction. Chemical analysis of some stone surfaces has revealed unusual characteristics that don't match typical weathering patterns or tool marks. Some researchers have suggested these features result from advanced cutting techniques, perhaps involving chemical agents, extreme heat, or other processes that could modify stone properties during working. The comparison with other precisely constructed ancient sites worldwide reveals striking similarities in both technique and precision. The same level of surface finishing appears at sites in Egypt, Lebanon, and Peru, where massive stones exhibit machined characteristics that challenge conventional explanations. The consistency of precision across vast distances suggests either remarkable technological convergence or shared knowledge systems that connected ancient builders across continents. In the perpetual twilight of the Altiplano, where oxygen is thin and the sun burns cold, Pumapunku stands as testimony to capabilities that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. The evidence of manufacturing precision that shouldn't exist in the ancient world, the questions multiply like the angles on the complex stone joints. Each precisely cut surface represents capabilities that challenge our understanding of technological development. Each machined hole implies tools and techniques for which no evidence exists in the archaeological record. The wind carries these questions across the high plateau, where scattered stones tell stories of interrupted work and lost knowledge. The blocks remain scattered where they fell or were abandoned, their precision undiminished by centuries of mountain weather. If the builders of Pumapunku could achieve manufacturing precision that rivals modern capabilities using techniques we don't understand, what else might they have accomplished? What other evidence of advanced ancient technology might lie buried beneath assumptions about what was possible in the pre-industrial world? The scattered stones of Pumapunku offer no easy answers, but they've begun to speak in the language of measurement and manufacturing, joining their voice to a global conversation about the achievements of civilizations that learned to work stone with impossible precision and then vanished, leaving only questions carved in andesite. On a speck of volcanic rock lost in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, 2,300 miles from the nearest populated land, stands something that shouldn't exist. Easter Island, Rapa Nui to its inhabitants, is famous for its massive stone heads, the mysterious moai that gaze across endless waters with their backs to the sea. But hidden among these better-known monuments lies a different kind of mystery, a wall of precisely fitted basalt blocks that appears to have been transplanted directly from the mountains of Peru. The precision is unmistakable. Massive stones fit together with tolerances measured in millimeters, their surfaces aligned so perfectly that knife blades cannot slip between the joints. The polygonal masonry technique matches, down to the smallest details, the construction methods found at Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and other megalithic sites in the Andes. Yet these locations are separated by over 6,000 miles of ocean, a distance that represents one of the greatest gaps between any supposedly unconnected ancient construction sites on Earth. How did identical building techniques appear on opposite sides of the Pacific, separated by an ocean that early civilizations supposedly couldn't cross? The Vinapu complex sits on Easter Island's southern coast, where relentless Pacific swells have battered the shoreline for millennia. Most visitors never see it, drawn instead to the more accessible and photographed moai sites scattered across the island's interior. But for those who make the journey to this wind-swept corner of the island, Vinapu presents a puzzle that challenges everything we think we know about ancient Pacific cultures. The main wall stretches for approximately 300 feet along what was once a ceremonial platform. The blocks are massive, some weighing over 10 tons, yet they fit together with the same impossible precision found in Peru's Sacred Valley. Each stone has been shaped to interlock with its neighbors in complex three-dimensional patterns that distribute weight and stress through geometric relationships rather than mortar or mechanical connections. The basalt itself tells part of the story. This volcanic rock formed from ancient lava flows, creating material that's both extremely hard and extremely difficult to work with precision. Shaping basalt requires sophisticated tools and techniques, especially when working to the tolerances exhibited at Vinapu. The smooth surfaces and exact fits suggest capabilities that exceed anything documented in traditional Polynesian stonework. The construction technique exhibits characteristics that have no parallels elsewhere in Polynesia. Throughout the Pacific Islands, traditional building methods relied on wood, thatch, and coral stone fitted with rough mortar. Even the most sophisticated Polynesian constructions, the massive coral platforms of Tonga, the stone fish traps of Hawaii, the terraced slopes of Tahiti, show nothing approaching the precision found at Vinapuu. This absence of comparable work in the region makes Vinapuu an extraordinary anomaly. If local inhabitants developed these techniques, where are the developmental stages? Where are the practice walls, the experimental constructions, the gradual refinement of methods that typically precede major architectural achievements? The precision appears fully formed at Vinapuu without apparent antecedents in Polynesian construction traditions. Archaeological investigation has revealed that Vinapuu was built in multiple phases, with the most precisely constructed elements appearing in the earliest layers. Later construction shows different characteristics: rougher fitting, smaller stones, techniques that match known Polynesian building practices. This pattern echoes the construction sequences found at megalithic sites worldwide, where sophisticated early work underlies cruder, later additions. The comparison with Peruvian megalithic sites goes beyond mere similarity. It approaches identity. Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian explorer famous for his Kon-Tiki expedition, spent considerable time studying Vinapuu in the 1950s. His archaeological excavations revealed megalithic walls of finely fitted blocks that he compared directly to constructions in Peru. Heyerdahl found no similar work elsewhere in Polynesia, leading him to conclude that the architectural inspiration likely came from South America. The absence of documented contact between Easter Island and South America during the periods when such construction techniques were supposedly in use makes the similarity even more puzzling. Conventional Pacific archaeology maintains that Polynesian cultures developed in isolation from South American influences, with oceanic distances serving as effective barriers to cultural exchange. Yet the evidence at Vinapuu suggests either remarkable convergent evolution in stoneworking techniques or direct knowledge transfer across thousands of miles of open ocean. The first possibility stretches credibility, identical precision techniques developing independently in cultures with completely different material traditions. The second challenges fundamental assumptions about ancient maritime capabilities and cultural contact patterns. Recent research has revealed additional connections between Easter Island and South America that strengthen the case for prehistoric contact. Genetic analysis of Easter Island inhabitants shows South American DNA markers that predate European contact. Archaeological evidence indicates the presence of South American sweet potatoes on Easter Island centuries before Europeans could have introduced them. These findings suggest cultural exchange that conventional Pacific archaeology hasn't fully acknowledged. The broader context of Pacific megaliths adds another dimension to the Vinapuu mystery. While Polynesian cultures are known primarily for wood and coral construction, recent discoveries have revealed scattered evidence of more sophisticated stonework throughout the Pacific. The massive stone platforms of Tonga, the megalithic structures of Pohnpei, and the precisely cut stones of some Hawaiian sites suggest capabilities that exceed traditional estimates of Polynesian technology. These discoveries hint at a more complex picture of ancient Pacific cultures than conventional archaeology typically portrays. If sophisticated stoneworking techniques existed in some Pacific locations, their absence from most Polynesian sites might reflect loss of knowledge rather than lack of capability. The preservation of Vinapuu offers clues about construction methods and age. The site's remarkable durability despite centuries of Pacific storms and seismic activity reflects the extraordinary quality of its construction. The precision fitting has allowed the structure to survive environmental stresses that have destroyed other ancient constructions on the island. This longevity suggests building techniques that understood principles of earthquake and weather resistance. Standing among the precisely fitted blocks of Vinapuu as Pacific trade winds carry salt spray from endless horizons, the questions multiply like waves against the shore. Each impossible fit speaks to capabilities that challenge comfortable assumptions about ancient Pacific civilizations. The blocks tell stories of capabilities that transcend oceanic barriers and cultural boundaries, speaking in a language of stone and mathematics that appears to connect distant shores across impossible distances. If precision stone-working techniques existed across the Pacific, connecting South America to the most remote, habited land on Earth, what other evidence of sophisticated ancient capabilities might exist in locations we haven't thought to examine? The questions hang in the Pacific air, carried on trade winds that have blown across these waters for millennia. In the eternal dialogue between ocean and island, Vinapuu stands as testimony to achievements that shouldn't be possible and connections that shouldn't exist according to conventional understanding of ancient Pacific cultures. The Pacific keeps its secrets beneath thousands of miles of blue water, but Vinapuu has begun to speak across the ocean's vastness. The world's greatest ocean might not have been the barrier we imagine, but rather a highway for knowledge and capabilities that spanned the globe long before we thought such connections were possible. What other impossible connections might exist, waiting to be recognized across the vast distances that we assume separated ancient cultures? Deep in the Montana wilderness, where the nearest civilization lies over 100 miles away, a wall of granite rises from the mountainside like a geometric impossibility. At first glance, it appears to be nature's work, weathered stone emerging from ancient earth. But step closer, and the illusion shatters. The massive blocks fit together with mechanical precision. Each stone has been shaped to interlock with its neighbors in patterns that require planning, skill, and tools that shouldn't have existed in prehistoric North America. If this is geology, it follows rules no textbook has ever written. Christopher Borton and Linda Welsh discovered what they now call Sage Wall by accident. For years, they'd owned this remote property in the Beartooth Mountains without knowing what lay buried beneath centuries of fallen timber and accumulated forest debris. Only when they decided to clear a heavily forested section of mountainside did the structure reveal itself. 275 feet of precisely fitted granite emerging from the earth like a message written in stone. The scale defies easy comprehension. The wall rises up to 25 feet above ground, but ground-penetrating radar reveals it continues another 15 feet below the surface, making the complete structure potentially 40 feet tall. Individual blocks weigh up to 91 tons, massive enough that modern construction equipment would struggle to position them with such accuracy. Yet here they sit, fitted together with tolerances that would challenge contemporary engineering. This presents the first question. According to everything we know about North American prehistory, no civilization capable of such work ever existed in this region. The indigenous peoples of Montana, the Crow, the Shoshone, the Blackfeet, were sophisticated cultures. They built with wood, hide, and earth, following seasonal migrations and the rhythms of the buffalo. Their oral traditions speak of ancient spirits dwelling in the mountains and powerful forces sleeping beneath the land, but nothing that might explain who possessed the knowledge and capability to quarry, transport, and precisely fit blocks of this magnitude. The construction technique itself deepens the mystery. This isn't simply a matter of stacking large stones. Many of the blocks exhibit polygonal masonry, each piece custom cut to fit its specific position in the wall. The stones interlock in 3 dimensions, creating a network of mutual support that requires sophisticated geometric understanding. To achieve this level of precision, the builders would have needed to visualize the entire structure before cutting a single block, planning how dozens of irregularly shaped pieces would come together to form a seamless whole. When researcher Michael Collins from the Wandering Wolf YouTube channel documented the site extensively, he discovered details that transformed a local puzzle into something with global implications. Scattered across the surface of many blocks are small, regular protrusions that serve no apparent structural purpose. These knobs, as they're called, might seem like a minor detail, but they represent identical features that appear on megalithic structures around the world. The same mysterious knobs mark the massive stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where blocks weighing over 200 tons fit together with similar precision. They appear on the megalithic walls of Baalbek in Lebanon, where some stones exceed 900 tons. Builders separated by thousands of miles and supposedly thousands of years, all using the same puzzling architectural signature. This discovery elevates Sage Wall from an isolated anomaly to part of a global pattern. Either humanity independently developed identical sophisticated construction techniques across multiple continents, which stretches credibility beyond the breaking point, or these sites share some deeper connection that conventional archaeology has yet to acknowledge. The magnetic properties of the wall add yet another layer to the mystery. Visitors report that compasses behave erratically near the structure, their needles spinning before settling on readings that don't correspond to true magnetic north. Even more unusual, many of the granite blocks themselves appear to be magnetized. Demonstration videos show magnets sticking firmly to the vertical wall surfaces, exhibiting magnetic pull far stronger than granite typically displays. While granite can acquire magnetic properties under specific conditions, lightning strikes, proximity to mineral deposits, certain types of geological stress, the uniformity and intensity of magnetism at Sage Wall exceeds what natural processes usually produce. The phenomenon recalls reports from other megalithic sites worldwide, where builders seem to have selected or treated stones to enhance their magnetic characteristics for unknown purposes. The geological timeline adds another dimension to the puzzle. If Sage Wall is indeed artificial, it has survived conditions that obliterated most traces of ancient human activity in the region. During the last ice age, this area experienced massive flooding when glacial dams repeatedly failed and sent torrents racing across the landscape at speeds up to 80 miles per hour. The Missoula floods, as geologists call these events, carved the dramatic scablands of eastern Washington and left debris deposits hundreds of feet deep throughout the Columbia River system. That any sophisticated construction could survive such cataclysmic forces intact suggests either remarkable engineering knowledge or remarkable age. The builders would have needed to understand hydraulic principles, creating structures capable of withstanding pressures that reshaped entire landscapes. Alternatively, the wall might predate the floods by so much time that it was already buried and protected when the waters came. The geographic context raises its own questions. Why build in this location, in a remote mountain valley far from any known centers of population or resources? Today the area seems isolated, but during the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower, it occupied a strategic position. If we examine pre-Younger Dryas glacial maps of North America, Sage Wall sits precisely on what would have been the primary migration route between Asia and North America, when the continents were connected by a land bridge. Perhaps this seemingly remote location wasn't always so isolated. Perhaps what we see today as wilderness once hosted something very different, a crossing point, a gathering place, a center of activity for people whose names and stories have been lost to time, but whose work in stone endures. Mainstream geology offers its own explanations. Author and filmmaker Timothy Alberino conducted detailed field analysis of Sage Wall and argued for natural formation. He noted that many of the cracks and fissures follow natural paths from the base to the top of the wall, suggesting geological rather than human processes. His argument holds that if the wall were artificial, builders would have offset and staggered the blocks to create better structural integrity, rather than aligning them along straight vertical lines. Dr. Stuart Parker, a geologist who works at the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, explained how the mysterious knobs could result from natural processes. When softer parts of rock erode faster than harder sections, the more resistant material remains as protruding knobs. This differential erosion occurs commonly in sedimentary and metamorphic rocks exposed to weathering over long periods. These natural explanations deserve serious consideration. The absence of clear tool marks, the lack of archaeological context, and the existence of somewhat similar natural formations elsewhere all support the possibility that Sage Wall represents an unusual but explainable geological phenomenon. But if Sage Wall formed through conventional geological processes, why don't we see similar formations throughout the region? Why does this particular outcrop exhibit characteristics found at megalithic sites worldwide, while nearby natural stone formations show none of these features? The question ultimately comes down to probability. How likely is it that natural processes would create structures exhibiting the precise characteristics, polygonal fitting, astronomical alignment, magnetic properties, and distinctive surface features that define megalithic construction worldwide? How likely is it that these characteristics would appear in isolation without the geological signatures that typically accompany the natural processes capable of creating geometric stone formations? Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Sage Wall isn't what it reveals about the distant past, but what it suggests about our understanding of that past. If this structure represents the work of an unknown civilization capable of precision engineering, astronomical observation, and large-scale construction, then our maps of ancient North America are missing entire chapters. The implications ripple outward in ways that challenge comfortable assumptions. If sophisticated stone-working cultures existed in prehistoric Montana, what other evidence lies hidden beneath the forests and valleys of the continent? How many sites remain undiscovered because they don't fit our expectations of where and when advanced civilizations could have flourished? The mountain wind carries these questions across the granite faces of Sage Wall, where shadows shift and stones keep their ancient counsel. In the gathering dusk of a Montana evening, the structure stands as it has for centuries or millennia, precise and puzzling, defying easy categorization. But Sage Wall has begun to speak, adding its voice to a global conversation conducted in stone and silence, precision and mystery. And if you listen carefully to what it's saying, if you let the implications settle like mountain snow in your mind, you might begin to hear the first notes of a much larger song. A song written by hands that knew how to move granite mountains but forgot to leave their names. A song that echoes from Montana to Peru, from Lebanon to Easter Island, carried in the language of megalithic construction that spans continents and possibly ages. What else is out there waiting to be found, and what will it tell us about the civilization that learned to write its most important messages in stone? They lie there in plain sight, weighing 50 to 80 tons each, fitted with precision that rivals modern engineering, and almost no one talks about them. While millions of visitors gaze upward at the soaring limestone courses of the Great Pyramid, photographing its ancient glory against the desert sky, few notice what lurks beneath their feet. The base blocks of Giza represent some of the most massive, precisely fitted stones in all of Egypt, yet they exist in a curious historical silence. These aren't the star players in the pyramid story we've been told. They're the forgotten foundations that whisper of capabilities their builders never bothered to document. These massive granite and limestone foundations, some weighing more than modern cranes can lift, appear without fanfare in the archaeological record. No hieroglyphic texts explain how they were quarried from sites hundreds of miles away. No inscriptions describe the techniques used to transport stones heavier than anything else the Egyptians are known to have moved. No papyrus records detail the methods for achieving the millimeter precision fitting that characterizes their placement. For a civilization that treated documentation as a sacred duty, this silence is deafening. Walk around the base of any Giza pyramid and you'll encounter stones that dwarf the famous pyramid blocks that captured the world's imagination. At Khufu's pyramid, granite blocks in the foundation weigh up to 80 tons, several times heavier than the 2.5-ton limestone blocks that form the pyramid's main structure. These massive foundations were quarried at Aswan, over 500 miles to the south, then transported down the Nile and precisely positioned to create the platform upon which the pyramid was built. The precision of their placement equals their extraordinary size. The joints between foundation blocks achieve tolerances that wouldn't be out of place in modern precision construction. The surfaces align across multiple tons of stone with geometric accuracy that requires sophisticated surveying and measurement capabilities. The fitting creates structural integrity through geometry alone, without mortar or mechanical connections. This pattern appears throughout Egyptian architecture, but it's most pronounced at the sites traditionally dated to the earliest periods of pyramid construction. The 4th dynasty pyramids of Sneferu, Khufu and Khafra show the largest, most precisely fitted foundation stones. Later, pyramid construction shows a general trend towards smaller blocks and simpler fitting techniques. Conventional archaeology explains this progression as the gradual development of construction techniques, early experiments leading to refined methods that could handle smaller stones more efficiently. But this explanation requires us to believe that Egyptian engineering progressed by becoming less capable over time, that later builders deliberately chose inferior techniques when superior methods had already been proven. The alternative interpretation is that the massive base blocks represent inherited construction, foundations that predated the pyramid superstructures built upon them. According to this theory, Egyptian pyramid builders found existing megalithic platforms and incorporated them into their own construction projects, but were unable to match the scale and precision of the original work. The quarrying presents its own puzzles. The Aswan granite quarries show evidence of massive stone removal, but the techniques used to extract the largest blocks remain unclear. Some quarry faces exhibit cutting marks that don't match known Egyptian tools or methods. The precision of the cuts and the scale of the extraction suggest capabilities that exceed conventional estimates of ancient quarrying technology. The transportation challenges multiply the mysteries surrounding foundation construction. Moving 80-ton blocks 500 miles down the Nile would require barges, loading equipment, and riverine infrastructure beyond anything documented in Egyptian records. The precision fitting of foundation blocks echoes techniques found at megalithic sites worldwide. The consistency of methods across such vast distances suggests either remarkable technological convergence or shared knowledge systems that connected ancient builders across continents. Perhaps the Egyptian foundations aren't unique achievements. They're part of a global phenomenon that conventional archaeology hasn't fully acknowledged. The pyramids themselves have captured human imagination for millennia, serving as symbols of ancient Egyptian achievement and human architectural ambition. But perhaps we've been looking in the wrong direction. Perhaps the real mystery isn't how the Egyptians built their pyramids, but how they found the foundations upon which to build them. The sun climbs higher over Giza, casting sharp shadows that define the edges between documented history and forgotten prehistory. In that interplay of light and darkness, the massive foundation blocks continue their ancient silence, bearing weights that shouldn't be possible while supporting stories that may not be entirely true. In the remote wilderness of southern Siberia, where the Shoria Mountains rise from endless forests like the bones of ancient giants, stands something that defies every assumption about the limits of human achievement. A wall of granite blocks stretches across the mountainside for over 700 feet, rising to heights of 140 feet, built from individual stones that dwarf anything found at the world's most famous megalithic sites. Some blocks are estimated to weigh 3,000 tons, more than twice the size of the largest stones at Baalbek, heavier than anything the ancients are supposed to have moved, lifted, or precisely positioned. If this is indeed ancient construction, then whoever built it possessed capabilities that exceed our understanding not just of ancient technology, but of what might be physically possible using any technology, ancient or modern. The Gornaya Shoria megaliths sit at 3,600 feet above sea level in one of Earth's most remote and inhospitable regions. During the Soviet era, the area was restricted access, guarded by military checkpoints that kept the sites hidden from outside investigation. Only in 2013 did a team of 19 researchers led by Georgy Sidorov manage to reach the location and document what they found there. What they discovered challenged every comfortable assumption about the scale of ancient construction. The massive granite blocks aren't roughly stacked or carelessly arranged. They exhibit flat surfaces, right angles, and systematic stacking that suggests deliberate placement rather than natural formation. The joints between blocks create straight lines that run for hundreds of feet, maintaining consistent angles and orientations that seem to follow architectural rather than geological principles. The scale alone places these constructions beyond anything documented in conventional archaeology. Individual blocks measuring 65 feet in length, 16 to 23 feet in height, and comparable thickness create masses that approach the limits of what even modern equipment can handle. A 3,000-ton block represents a mass equivalent to about 40 fully loaded semi-trucks, yet at Gornaya Shoria such blocks appear to have been cut, moved, and precisely positioned as construction elements. The precision of the work equals its extraordinary scale. The surfaces show flat faces and straight edges that suggest cutting rather than natural fracturing. Georgy Sidorov documented additional anomalies during his expedition. Compass readings became erratic near the megaliths, with magnetic needles deviating significantly from true readings. The team reported a negative geomagnetic field in the area, suggesting electromagnetic properties that might result from unknown construction techniques or materials. The research team encountered what Sidorov described as evidence of ancient rock fusion, areas where granite appears to have been heated to melting point and then reformed. Such effects would require temperatures and techniques far beyond anything traditionally associated with ancient civilizations. The melted areas show characteristics that suggest controlled application of extreme heat rather than natural volcanic processes. Scattered around the main structure are additional massive blocks that appear to have been blown away by some tremendous force. These displaced stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, lie scattered across the mountainside as if they were moved by an explosion or cataclysmic event of extraordinary power. The distribution pattern suggests a destructive force that could shatter and scatter megalithic construction across significant distances. No Russian historical records mention construction of such magnitude in the Shoria Mountains. No indigenous legends or oral traditions explain the presence of massive worked stones in this remote location. The blocks appear to exist without cultural context or chronological anchors. The official Russian position maintains that the Gornaya Shoria formations are entirely natural, products of geological processes that created the appearance of constructed walls through weathering, erosion, and natural fracturing patterns. This explanation attempts to account for the regular shapes and stacking patterns as coincidental results of how granite breaks and weathers in the Siberian climate. The historical context of the region, provides some perspective on the challenges involved in any hypothetical ancient construction. During the last ice age, much of Siberia experienced harsh but not impossible conditions. The region supported large populations of both humans and megafauna, with archaeological evidence confirming human presence dating back at least 30,000 years. The mammoth steppe environment that dominated Siberia during glacial periods was actually more hospitable than many other regions at the time. While northern Europe was largely covered by ice sheets, Siberia remained relatively ice-free and supported diverse ecosystems. This context suggests that advanced human cultures could have existed in the region during periods when other areas were uninhabitable. However, even accounting for favorable Ice Age conditions, the scale of construction implied by the Gornaya Shoria megaliths exceeds anything documented in Siberian archaeology. Moving 3,000-ton blocks would challenge modern equipment even under ideal conditions. Accomplishing such feats in a pre-industrial context would require technologies and organizational capabilities for which no evidence exists in the archaeological record. The dating challenges at Gornaya Shoria parallel those at other megalithic sites. Without organic materials or clear archaeological context, determining when the structures were created proves nearly impossible using conventional archaeological methods. Georgy Sidorov suggested an age of approximately 100,000 years, placing the construction in a period that predates known human civilizations by tens of millennia. Such extreme dating proposals push against the boundaries of accepted chronology and technological development. Conventional archaeology places the development of sophisticated construction techniques much later in human history, with megalithic building typically associated with cultures from the last few thousand years. Dating Gornaya Shoria to 100,000 years ago would require fundamental revision of assumptions about when advanced capabilities first emerged. The megaliths continue their ancient vigil in the Shoria Mountains, bearing masses that approach the limits of material possibility while exhibiting precision that exceeds conventional explanation. In the vast silence of the taiga, Gornaya Shoria stands as testimony to achievements that shouldn't be possible according to any known principles of ancient or modern engineering. The massive blocks offer no easy answers, only evidence of capabilities that transcend current understanding of technological development and human achievement. In the gathering darkness of the Siberian sky, where aurora occasionally dance above granite giants, Gornaya Shoria keeps its impossible secrets. The blocks remain stacked that challenge every assumption about ancient capabilities, waiting for explanations that may require fundamental revision of everything we think we know about the limits of what minds and hands could achieve in the distant past. Back to Peru's Sacred Valley, where the Andes pierce the sky and ancient clouds drift through stone corridors, massive blocks of pink granite stand locked together like pieces of an impossible puzzle. The fit is so perfect that even after centuries of earthquakes and mountain weather, you cannot slide a knife blade between them. Each megalithic block weighs between 50 and 100 tons, yet they align with mechanical precision, surfaces flat as mirrors, angles cut to mathematical perfection, joints fitted with tolerances that would challenge modern engineering. At nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, in a landscape where every breath requires effort and every stone must be carried up impossible slopes, someone created architecture that defies explanation. The question isn't just who possessed such skill, but how they achieved industrial-grade precision in one of the world's most challenging construction environments. The site, known as Ollantaytambo, sits like a geometric anomaly against the organic curves of the Andean landscape. Most visitors come to see the terraced fields and Inca stonework, but hidden within the complex lies something far more puzzling: megalithic construction that exhibits characteristics found nowhere else in the documented Inca architectural tradition. The Temple of the Sun dominates the eastern face of the complex, its 6 massive monoliths rising like a wall of pink granite against the mountain sky. Each block stands roughly 14 feet tall and varies in width, but all are precisely fitted together despite their irregular shapes. The largest weighs an estimated 70 tons, though some researchers suggest the blocks at the base may exceed 100 tons when their buried portions are considered. More puzzling still, the granite used in these monoliths doesn't come from local sources. Analysis indicates the stone was quarried from deposits at least 50 kilometers away, across terrain that includes steep valleys, rushing rivers, and mountain passes that would challenge modern transportation equipment. The engineering required to move 70-ton blocks across such landscape transcends anything documented in Inca engineering traditions. Examination of the Temple of the Sun reveals details that deepen the mystery. The surfaces of the megalithic blocks exhibit tool marks unlike anything produced by bronze or stone implements, the only tools traditionally associated with Inca construction. Long, straight cuts run across the granite faces with mathematical precision. Some blocks show what appear to be saw marks, perfectly straight lines where the stone seems to have been sliced with surgical accuracy. On one of the prominent monoliths, a Chacana cross, an ancient Andean symbol resembling a stepped pyramid, has been carved with extraordinary precision. The symbol's geometric perfection, with its perfectly straight lines and exact angles, demonstrates a level of stone carving that approaches mechanical accuracy. The same symbol appears at other megalithic sites throughout South America, suggesting either cultural connection or shared building traditions across vast distances. Between the 6 main monoliths, smaller stones fill the gaps with the same precise fitting found in the larger blocks. These intermediate pieces vary dramatically in size and shape, yet each has been custom cut to fit its specific position in the wall. The 3-dimensional puzzle required to achieve this level of integration suggests advanced planning capabilities and sophisticated understanding of geometric relationships. Behind the perfectly fitted front wall, however, the construction quality changes dramatically. The rear faces of the same structure show crude stonework, roughly fitted blocks with obvious gaps filled by smaller stones and clay mortar. The contrast is so stark it appears that 2 completely different civilizations worked on the same structure, one with precision that exceeds modern standards, and another using primitive techniques. This dichotomy appears throughout Ollantaytambo. The most precisely constructed elements, the massive fitted blocks, the perfect cuts, the sophisticated joinery, exist alongside obviously later work that shows the characteristics of known Inca construction. The pattern suggests the Inca found existing megalithic structures and built upon them using their own techniques, but were unable to match the precision of the original builders. Scattered throughout the site are additional megalithic blocks that tell a story of interrupted construction. Some lie partially worked, with saw cuts extending partway through their mass before stopping abruptly. Others show evidence of transport preparation, carved lifting points, trimmed edges, surface treatments, but remain where they were abandoned centuries ago. Many of these abandoned blocks exceed 100 tons and show clear evidence of artificial modification. Some exhibit the same mysterious scoop marks found at megalithic sites worldwide, curved depressions in the stone surface that appear to have been created by scooping out softened material. The Gateway of the Gods, another precisely constructed section of Ollantaytambo, demonstrates the same impossible fitting found in the Temple of the Sun. Massive granite blocks interlock in complex 3-dimensional patterns, with each stone custom-shaped to interface with multiple neighbors simultaneously. The joints are so tight that water cannot penetrate between them, a characteristic that has allowed these structures to survive centuries of seismic activity without significant damage. Analysis of the stone surfaces reveals additional anomalies. Many blocks show a glassy smoothness that doesn't match the texture expected from conventional stoneworking techniques. Some researchers have suggested this smoothness results from a vitrification process, exposure to extreme heat that partially melts the stone surface. While this theory remains controversial, the surface characteristics don't match those typically produced by grinding, polishing, or other known finishing techniques. The puzzle deepens when examining the quarry sites from which the megalithic stones were extracted. The wall of the living rock shows evidence of massive stone removal, with precisely cut rectangular sections extracted from the mountain face. The cutting marks are geometrically perfect, straight edges, exact right angles, smooth surfaces that show no evidence of conventional quarrying techniques. Many of these extraction sites are located high on vertical cliff faces, some over 400 feet above the valley floor. How were the massive blocks lowered from such heights without shattering? The cliff faces show no evidence of ramps or mechanical installations that could have supported such operations. If the stones were simply dropped, they would have been destroyed. Yet somehow, massive blocks were extracted from inaccessible locations and transported across impossible terrain. The evidence suggests a construction sequence that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. The most sophisticated work, the perfectly fitted megalithic blocks, the precision cuts, the impossible transportation, appears to predate known Inca occupation of the site. The cruder stonework, clearly identifiable as Inca construction, seems to represent later additions and repairs to existing structures. The broader implications of Ollantaytambo extend beyond questions of Inca capability to fundamental assumptions about technological development in ancient societies. Standing among the megalithic blocks of Ollantaytambo in the thin air of the sacred valley, the questions multiply like echoes off mountain walls. The precision speaks to capabilities that shouldn't have existed in pre-Columbian Peru. The abandoned blocks scattered throughout the site tell their own story, of interrupted work, of projects that ended suddenly, of capabilities that seemed to vanish as unexpectedly as they appeared. Some researchers suggest a cataclysmic event ended the megalithic construction phase, forcing abandonment of partially completed work. Others propose gradual loss of knowledge as original builders were displaced or absorbed by successive cultures. Whatever happened, the megalithic elements of Ollantaytambo stand as monuments to capabilities that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. They join a growing inventory of precisely constructed ancient sites that challenge comfortable assumptions about technological development and cultural evolution. The Inca built magnificently at Ollantaytambo, creating agricultural terraces and ceremonial spaces that demonstrate their sophisticated understanding of engineering and astronomy. But beneath their acknowledged achievements lie megalithic foundations that speak to different hands, different knowledge, different relationships with stone and gravity and time. If the builders of Ollantaytambo could achieve precision that rivals modern machining in one of Earth's most challenging construction environments, what other impossible things might they have accomplished? What other sites might bear their signature precision scattered across the globe like calling cards from a civilization that learned to write its most important messages in granite and mystery? The questions hang in the thin mountain air, waiting for answers that may lie buried not just beneath Peruvian soil, but beneath assumptions about what was possible in the ancient world, and who possessed the knowledge to make the impossible real. From the hidden walls of Montana to the massive blocks of Siberia, from the precision of Peru to the mysteries of Easter Island, we've traced a pattern that shouldn't exist. Across continents and cultures, separated by thousands of miles and supposedly thousands of years, the same impossible achievements repeat like echoes of a forgotten song. Megalithic blocks weighing hundreds of tons, fitted with millimeter precision, cut with techniques we don't understand. The conventional explanation treats each site as an isolated marvel, the product of local genius, cultural determination, and ingenious application of simple tools. But the more closely we examine the evidence, the more difficult it becomes to accept these coincidences. How many times can the same impossible precision appear independently? How many cultures can discover identical solutions to problems that challenge our capabilities today? Perhaps we've been looking at the evidence backwards. Instead of asking how so many different civilizations achieved similar impossibilities, maybe we should ask whether they were different civilizations at all. There exists a hypothesis that could explain everything we've seen, a theory that emerged over a century ago from one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in history. It suggests that these scattered monuments aren't the independent achievements of separate cultures, but rather the surviving remnants of something far more extraordinary. A single, advanced civilization that once spanned the globe before vanishing beneath the waves of a cataclysmic flood. They called it Mu. The story begins in British colonial India, where a young officer named James Churchward formed an unlikely friendship with a high-ranking temple priest. During a casual conversation that would change our understanding of human history, the priest revealed something extraordinary: ancient stone tablets written in a language so old that only 2 other people in India could read it. The language was called Nagamaya, and the tablets told a story that predated all known civilizations. Churchward struck a bargain with the priest. "Teach me this dead language," he proposed, "and I will help restore and preserve these ancient records." What emerged from years of painstaking translation was a narrative that challenged everything historians believed about the development of human civilization. The tablets spoke of Mu, the place where humanity first appeared. Not a small settlement or regional culture, but a vast continent that flourished in the Pacific Ocean between 50,000 and 12,000 years ago. According to Churchward's translations, Mu was dominated by an advanced race and was superior in many respects to our own civilization. This wasn't merely another ancient culture that happened to build with stone. Mu represented something unprecedented, a global civilization with over 64 million inhabitants, organized into 10 tribes, but united under a single government and sharing a single religion. The scope of Mu's influence, according to the tablets, was truly global. The continent stretched east-west from the Marianas to Easter Island, and north-south from Hawaii to Mangaia, larger than South America. But Mu's reach extended far beyond its Pacific homeland through an extensive network of colonies on other continents. These weren't temporary outposts or trading stations, but permanent settlements that carried Mu's knowledge and techniques to every inhabited land on Earth. This would explain the impossible similarities we've documented throughout our journey. The polygonal masonry of Sacsayhuaman and the precision fitting at Vinapu weren't separate inventions. They were applications of the same Mu engineering principles carried by colonists across vast oceanic distances. The Moai statues of Easter Island take on new meaning when viewed through the lens of Mu heritage. The Rapa Nui people, when asked about the inspiration for building such monuments, revealed that the Moai were created to honor their ancestors. But who were these ancestors, and where did they come from? The oral traditions of the islanders provide intriguing clues. They speak of the Moai walking to their current positions, a description that might preserve garbled memories of the advanced transportation techniques once possessed by their Mu forebears. The precision construction found at Vinapu, so similar to Peruvian megalithic work, might represent the last expression of Mu engineering knowledge before it was finally lost to time and catastrophe. The global distribution of pyramid construction provides another piece of the Mu puzzle. According to the Mu hypothesis, these weren't separate inventions by isolated cultures, but rather expressions of a single architectural tradition carried by Mu colonists to their various settlements. As the influence of the mother civilization waned and contact with the Pacific homeland was lost, each colony developed its own variations on the basic pyramid design, but the fundamental knowledge remained embedded in their construction techniques. The legends support this interpretation in ways that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. Stories of sunken continents and lost homelands appear in the oral traditions of cultures across the Pacific and beyond. The Polynesian concept of Hawaiki, the Hawaiian memory of Mu itself, the Aztec legends of Aztlan, the Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki, all describe advanced societies that possessed knowledge far beyond what primitive cultures should have been able to develop. These aren't vague flood myths that might refer to local disasters. They're specific memories of a time when the world was different, when knowledge and capabilities existed that were lost in a cataclysm so complete that only scattered survivors remained to carry fragments of the old wisdom to new lands. The consistency of these accounts across cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other suggests a shared historical memory of actual events. According to Churchward's translation of the tablets, Mu's destruction came suddenly and catastrophically. 12,000 years ago, he wrote, Mu was completely obliterated in almost a single night. The continent faced a series of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions so severe that the broken land fell into that great abyss of fire and was covered by over 50 million square miles of water. This timeline coincides remarkably with known geological events at the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, massive climatic upheavals marked the transition from glacial to interglacial conditions. Sea levels rose dramatically as ice sheets melted and volcanic activity increased as the Earth's crust adjusted to changing pressures. If a Pacific civilization existed during this period, it would have faced unprecedented challenges to its survival. The pattern of knowledge loss we've observed at so many megalithic sites, sophisticated early construction overlaid by cruder, later work, would reflect this process of cultural degradation following catastrophe. Each generation of Mu survivors retained less of the original knowledge until eventually even the memory of their homeland's capabilities faded into legend and myth. The precision-cutting marks found at sites like Pumapunku, Ollantaytambo, and Baalbek might not represent primitive tools achieving impossible results through determination and skill. Instead, they could be evidence of Mu technologies that approached or exceeded our current capabilities for stoneworking. Some researchers have suggested that these precision effects resulted from techniques that could soften stone, making it temporarily malleable for shaping before it hardened again. Andean legends speak of a plant-based acid that could mold rocks into desired shapes, knowledge that supposedly came from the Viracochas, divine teachers who arrived before the Inca and shared advanced building techniques. Perhaps the Viracochas weren't gods or extraterrestrials, but rather the last representatives of Mu knowledge carrying fragments of the mother civilization's techniques to survivors in the Andes. The reverence with which later cultures treated these teachers might reflect accurate memories of their extraordinary capabilities that seemed godlike only because the knowledge behind them had been lost. Standing back and viewing the evidence we've assembled, the identical techniques separated by impossible distances, the Mu hypothesis offers elegant explanations for mysteries that conventional archaeology addresses only through increasingly strained coincidences. This doesn't require believing in impossible technologies or supernatural intervention. It simply requires accepting that human civilization might be older, more sophisticated, and more globally connected than we've assumed. The fingerprints are there in the stone. Perhaps what we call ancient mysteries aren't mysteries at all, but rather memories encoded in stone by survivors who wanted to ensure that some trace of their knowledge would outlast the catastrophe that destroyed their world. Perhaps the megalithic sites aren't separate achievements by isolated cultures, but rather the scattered monuments of a single, globe-spanning civilization whose true scope and sophistication we're only beginning to recognize. The stones keep their secrets fitted together with, but maybe they're not keeping secrets at all. Maybe they're telling the truth about a world that existed before the flood, and we simply haven't learned to read the language they're speaking. The Moai gaze across Easter Island's waters, not toward some distant shore, but toward the homeland that lies beneath the Pacific waves. The precision walls of Peru don't represent alien techniques, but rather the work of our own ancestors, preserving knowledge that predates the great catastrophe. The massive stones of Baalbek don't challenge human capability, but rather demonstrate what humans could achieve when they possessed the full breadth of their inheritance. In the end, the question isn't whether these monuments represent impossible coincidences or inherited knowledge. The question is whether we're ready to consider that human history might be far stranger, far older, and far more sophisticated than we've dared to imagine. A civilization whose children scattered across the globe when the waters rose, carrying fragments of impossible knowledge to distant shores where they built monuments that still stand today, still challenging our assumptions, still whispering about the world that was lost beneath the waves.